America's story is deeply woven with firearms, both as tools for survival and as powerful symbols. From the earliest days, guns were part of daily life on the frontier. They were essential for hunting, protection, and forging a new existence in a vast, untamed land. Settlers relied on firearms to put food on the table, and to defend themselves against dangers, both human and wild, that shaped the American experience. The image of the Minuteman, a citizen soldier with musket in hand, became a lasting symbol of American resolve. This figure represents a legacy of self-reliance and readiness that endures to this day. Firearms were more than equipment, they were keys to building a nation and taming the wilderness. This early relationship with guns laid a foundation that still shapes American culture and law. What began as a practical necessity soon forged a deep cultural connection. Over time, the gun became more than just a tool. It evolved into a symbol of freedom, independence, and the American spirit. For many, owning a firearm is seen as the ultimate expression of personal liberty. It's viewed as a safeguard against tyranny and a fundamental right of a free people. This belief is rooted in the revolutionary spirit that shaped the United States. The idea that an armed citizenry checks government power remains a core principle for many Americans. This deeply held value helps explain why the gun debate is so passionate and complex. It touches on questions of identity and what it means to be American. Over the centuries, firearms themselves have changed dramatically. The simple, single-shot muskets of the colonial era are a far cry from today's advanced firearms. Innovations in gun manufacturing have led to more powerful, more accurate, and faster-firing weapons. This technological evolution has had a profound impact on American society. While these advancements are celebrated by sports shooters and collectors, they have also raised new questions and concerns. The conversation now includes not just the right to own guns, but what types are appropriate for civilian use. Firearms are central to the ongoing debate, both practical tools and powerful symbols at the heart of the American experience. For some, a gun is for sport, hunting, or target shooting. For others, it's strictly for self-defense, a last resort. And for many, it remains a cherished piece of cultural heritage, passed down through generations. Understanding this complex relationship is the first step in exploring America's long and often contentious journey with firearms. It's why any discussion about gun laws touches deeply held beliefs about identity, freedom, and security. The national debate over gun control is one of the most polarizing issues in America today. It's a conversation that stirs strong emotions and deep convictions on all sides. This issue divides communities, families, and lawmakers, often making it difficult to find common ground. The conversation can feel stuck, with each side speaking past the other, rarely finding space for real dialogue. On one side, advocates for stricter gun laws point to the high rates of gun violence and the toll it takes on communities. They argue that stronger regulations are necessary to save lives and prevent future tragedies. The devastating impact of mass shootings is a constant reminder of what's at stake. For these advocates, public safety is the top priority, and urgent action is seen as essential. On the other side, supporters of gun rights emphasize the Second Amendment and the importance of individual liberty. They see the right to keep and bear arms as a fundamental freedom, deeply rooted in American history. Any attempt to restrict gun ownership is viewed as an infringement on constitutional rights. Many argue that responsible gun owners should not be punished for the actions of criminals. For them, safety means empowering law-abiding citizens to protect themselves and their families. These opposing perspectives create a deep and lasting divide. The debate is rarely just about guns, it's about different visions of what makes a society safe and free. Is safety best achieved through collective action and government regulation, or through individual empowerment and the right to self-defense? These questions have no easy answers. They touch on core beliefs about government's role and the nature of individual rights. The intensity of the debate reflects just how much is at stake for people on all sides. It's a conversation about the kind of country Americans want to build. This national debate is not new. It has been part of the American story for generations. In recent decades, the debate has only grown more intense and visible. Tragic events often bring the issue to the forefront, reigniting the debate with renewed passion. Each new incident forces the country to confront these difficult questions again. To truly understand why this conflict runs so deep, it's essential to look at the historical roots of the debate, how America's past shaped the present divide. Finding common ground remains a challenge. The roots of this conflict are woven through American history and law. To understand why the gun debate is so intense today, we need to trace its roots through American history. The story of gun laws is a story of change, shaped by events, technology, and shifting beliefs. Over more than 2 centuries, laws and attitudes about firearms have changed dramatically. What was once common sense in one era might seem controversial in another. In the 1700s, guns were seen as tools for survival and defense. Today, they are at the center of a national debate about rights and safety. The evolution of gun laws in America mirrors the nation's own growth and transformation, each era leaving its mark on the next. Changes in technology, society, and our understanding of the Constitution have all shaped the way Americans think about guns. By following this timeline, we can see how past choices and events led to the debates we have today. This perspective is essential for any real conversation about the future of gun laws. Our journey begins in the colonial era, when America was still a patchwork of settlements facing constant threats. Early American communities set their own rules about who could own guns and how they could be used. Many laws focused on keeping local militias ready for defense. Regulations were practical, designed for a society facing real dangers. The adoption of the Second Amendment in 1791 was a turning point, setting the stage for centuries of debate. Its words would spark legal and social battles that continue to this day. What did the framers mean by the right to keep and bear arms? That question has driven countless court cases and political fights. As the country expanded west in the 1800s, new challenges and new laws emerged. Wild West towns passed local gun ordinances to curb violence, showing that even then, Americans debated how best to balance rights and safety. The Civil War brought new firearm technology and changed the relationship between citizens and government. The 20th century brought even more dramatic shifts, as America became an urban, industrial nation. Organized crime in the 1920s and 30s led to the first major federal gun laws. The government began regulating weapons like machine guns and sawed-off shotguns, marking a new era of federal involvement. This was a major shift in how America approached gun laws. In this video, we'll travel through the years, exploring how each moment in history shaped the next. We'll look at key events, landmark laws, and pivotal court decisions that changed the course of the debate. This is not a simple story. It's a complex, sometimes contradictory history, full of moments of agreement and deep division. Our goal is a clear, fact-based timeline. By understanding the past, we can better grasp the present and the future of America's gun laws. In colonial America, firearms were woven into the fabric of daily life. They were not just tools, but necessities for survival and community defense. Life was precarious, and the gun was an indispensable tool for survival. For the colonists carving out a life in a vast and unfamiliar land, a musket was as essential as a plow or an axe. It was used to hunt game, providing a vital source of food for families and communities. But beyond hunting, firearms were crucial for protection. The frontier was unpredictable, with dangers from wild animals and the threat of conflict with rival powers or native nations. Yet, the idea that gun ownership was completely unregulated is a myth. From the start, colonial governments passed laws to manage firearms, balancing individual need with public safety. These were not aimed at disarming the populace, but rather at ensuring public safety and order. For instance, many colonies had laws dictating the safe storage of gunpowder. There were also rules against firing guns within city limits or while intoxicated. These laws also often served a purpose of social and racial control. Gun ownership was frequently restricted based on race and social standing. In many colonies, especially in the South, laws explicitly forbade enslaved people and even free black individuals from possessing firearms. These restrictions were born out of a deep-seated fear of slave rebellions. This demonstrates that from the earliest days, the right to bear arms was not always extended to everyone equally. The concept of the militia was central to colonial society. Without a standing army, defense was a shared responsibility. Every able-bodied white male was expected to serve. Instead, defense was a collective responsibility. Pretty much every able-bodied adult white male was considered part of the local militia. This wasn't some voluntary club, it was actually a civic duty. Militia laws required these men to own a firearm. Regular musters were a big part of militia life. Officers would check everyone's weapons to make sure they were fit for service. If you showed up without a proper firearm, you could actually be fined. The whole focus was on the collective security of the community. The image of the citizen soldier was super important. This was a sharp contrast to the European model of large professional armies. which were often seen as tools of monarchs, and honestly a threat to liberty. The American Revolution was, honestly, the ultimate test of the militia system. In the lead-up to the war, the British had tried to disarm the colonists, which was seen as a clear act of tyranny. For the founding generation, the link between firearm ownership and the ability to resist oppression wasn't just abstract, they had lived it. After winning independence, the founders faced the huge challenge of creating a new government. Many people, known as the Anti-Federalists, were afraid that the new federal government would get too powerful and trample on rights. This context is what gave birth to the Second Amendment. Ratified in 1791, its text says, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed." For more than 2 centuries, the meaning of these 27 words has been, fiercely debated. Did it protect an individual right to own guns for any purpose, like self-defense? Or was it only meant to protect the right of states to maintain their militias? Back in the founding era, the dominant understanding was that the Second Amendment was mainly about ensuring the viability of the state militias. The constitutional debate was all about the military power of the states versus the new federal government. The 19th century marked a turning point for America. As the nation pushed westward, the Wild West became a symbol of both opportunity and danger. Firearms were woven into daily life, shaping the American identity in profound ways. Pioneers, traders, and settlers faced harsh frontiers. Guns were essential for hunting, protection, and survival, especially where law enforcement was scarce and communities were isolated. This era saw rapid advances in firearms technology. The percussion cap made guns more reliable, and repeating firearms like the Colt revolver transformed personal firepower. These innovations became icons of the West. The image of the rugged armed individual took hold in American culture. Dime novels and later movies spread the legend of the lone cowboy and the frontier lawman. But westward expansion came at a cost. The U.S. government used military force and advanced weaponry to displace Native American nations, fulfilling the idea of manifest destiny from coast to coast. Despite the myth of a lawless Wild West, many boom towns enacted strict gun ordinances. Saloons, gambling, and widespread gun carrying often led to violence, prompting towns to regulate firearms for public safety. Visitors were often required to check their firearms with the local sheriff. Cowboys and travelers had to surrender their weapons upon entering town limits, a practice enforced by legendary lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson. These rules were not just folklore. They reflected a real effort to balance individual rights with community safety, a theme that would echo through American law. Beyond the frontier, states began regulating specific weapons, especially concealed handguns. By the early 1800s, many states banned carrying concealed weapons, and courts generally upheld these laws. These early regulations show that Americans did not see the right to bear arms as absolute. Balancing gun rights with public safety has long been part of the nation's legal tradition. The Civil War was a watershed moment. The scale of the conflict drove massive innovation in gun manufacturing, and the devastating power of modern weaponry changed the course of American society. After the war, millions of surplus military firearms entered civilian hands. This widespread availability of military-grade weapons left a lasting mark on American life. The aftermath of the Civil War also brought a dark chapter. Southern states enacted the Black Codes, repressive laws that included explicit bans on gun ownership for Black Americans. These laws were designed to maintain racial control and prevent Black citizens from defending themselves. The injustice of these restrictions became a driving force behind the 14th Amendment. Advocates pointed to the disarmament of Black citizens as a key example of rights that needed federal protection. In the early 20th century, Prohibition fueled a booming black market for alcohol. This era saw the rise of notorious gangsters and organized crime, as illegal profits soared and violence escalated in American cities. The violence was intensified by new firearms technology, especially weapons like the Thompson submachine gun. Gangland shootouts became infamous, and the public grew alarmed at the firepower on the streets. The 1929 St. Valentine's Day massacre shocked the nation, symbolizing the lawlessness of the time. The use of machine guns in public crimes made headlines and increased calls for government action. As police struggled to keep up, it became clear that local laws were not enough. The nation demanded a federal response to the growing threat of organized crime and heavily armed criminals. In 1934, President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration passed the National Firearms Act, or NFA. This was the first major federal gun law, targeting machine guns and sawed-off shotguns. The NFA did not ban these weapons outright, but made them expensive and difficult to obtain through strict registration and a heavy tax. The goal was to reduce their use in crime. In 1939, the Supreme Court upheld the NFA in United States v. Miller, ruling that certain weapons could be regulated if not related to militia use. This affirmed federal authority over specific firearms. Congress continued to act, passing the Federal Firearms Act of 1938. This law created the first list of people prohibited from owning guns and required gun dealers to be licensed. After the burst of federal laws in the 1930s, the national debate quieted. For about 20 years, there were no major new federal gun regulations, and gun culture continued to grow. During this time, gun ownership remained widespread, and a vibrant gun culture flourished. Organizations like the National Rifle Association, or NRA, focused primarily on their original mission, promoting marksmanship, firearm safety, and shooting sports. However, beneath the surface, changes were brewing. A mail-order gun industry was growing, often with no background check or questions asked. The relative calm of the post-war era was, really shattered in the 1960s. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed. The assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, used a surplus Italian military rifle that he had purchased via mail order. The debate dragged on for years. In 1966, a sniper climbed a tower at the University of Texas. Then in 1968, the nation was rocked by two more devastating assassinations. These final two tragedies broke the legislative stalemate. The result was the Gun Control Act of 1968. It was a massive law expanding federal control over the firearms industry. The GCA banned interstate mail-order sales of all firearms, required anyone selling guns to have a federal firearms license. A crucial element was the expanded list of prohibited persons. The law also set minimum purchase ages. Passage of the Gun Control Act of 1968 provoked a powerful backlash. Many gun owners saw the GCA as a burdensome infringement on their rights. This internal tension came to a head in 1977, an event that became known as the Revolt at Cincinnati. They successfully redirected the NRA's mission, transforming it from a sportsman's club into a powerful political lobbying force. The movement's first major legislative victory came in 1986 with the passage of the Firearm Owners Protection Act, or FOPA. This law was a direct response to the perceived overreach of the 1968 Gun Control Act. Public concern over gun violence surged again. One of the most galvanizing events was the 1981 assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan, which left his press secretary James Brady permanently disabled. James and his wife Sarah Brady became tireless advocates. Another major catalyst was the proliferation of a new class of firearms often referred to as assault weapons. A tragic 1989 schoolyard shooting in Stockton, California, horrified the nation. In 1993, Congress passed the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act. A year later, in 1994, Congress passed the federal assault weapons ban. However, it also created a massive political backlash. The era came to a definitive close in 2004. The Republican-controlled Congress allowed the ban to expire. In 2008, the Supreme Court made history with District of Columbia v. Heller. For the first time, the court directly addressed whether the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to own firearms for personal use. In a narrow 5-4 decision, the court ruled that the Second Amendment does protect an individual's right to possess firearms, especially for self-defense at home. Justice Antonin Scalia wrote the majority opinion, reshaping the legal landscape. But the court also made it clear, this right is not unlimited. Laws restricting certain types of weapons or regulating gun ownership were not automatically struck down. 2 years later in McDonald v. City of Chicago, the Supreme Court extended this interpretation nationwide. The right to keep and bear arms for self-defense was now recognized as fundamental and applied to all states. This energized legal challenges across the country. Lower courts saw a surge of lawsuits testing the limits of gun regulations. In 2022, the court again made headlines with New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. The justices struck down New York's strict licensing rules, affirming that the Second Amendment protects carrying a handgun for self-defense outside the home. While the courts were reshaping the law, the nation faced a wave of mass shootings. Tragedies like Sandy Hook in 2012 brought the debate to a boiling point, fueling public outcry and calls for reform. In response, President Barack Obama urged Congress to act. Despite widespread public support, new federal gun laws failed to pass. The cycle of violence continued. Charleston, Orlando, Las Vegas, Parkland. Each tragedy sparked protests and renewed activism, especially among young people demanding change. With Congress deadlocked, states have taken the lead, creating a patchwork of gun laws that vary widely across the country. Today, the gun debate is more polarized than ever. Americans are divided by deeply held beliefs about safety, freedom, and the role of government. Federal action remains elusive as states move further apart. The courts will continue to shape the boundaries of the Second Amendment. The story of America's gun laws is still being written. Our journey reveals a nation in constant evolution, where the tension between individual liberty and collective safety remains unresolved. The future will be shaped in state houses, courtrooms, and in the ongoing conversation among citizens.